Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today on this Food and Drink Industries Group webinar on AI reducing accidents and prompting and promoting a positive safety culture. It's a pleasure to see so many of you here today with us on what is hopefully a lovely sunny afternoon. I know that the weather here out in Leeds is a little bit not quite as sunny as we hoped that it might be, but hey, it's November. It's the best that we can hope for. If you want to introduce yourselves in the chat, please do feel free if there's the option to do so. Now, what I'm going to very quickly do is share my screen with you, and we'll jump straight into it with a bit of an introduction and then get into our webinar. So if you bear with me 1 second. Terrific stuff. Perfect. So then, let's get into it. So who am I? My name is Peter Jenkins. I'm a Group Health and Safety Manager at DL Limited. We are a food manufacturer of dry spice, blends, mixes, and all types of stuff that we supply to wider food manufacturers and the butchery industry in the UK. But I'm also, more importantly, a committee member of the Food and Drink Industries Group. Many of you might have joined us following our conference earlier on in October, where we were proudly sponsored by Protex AI, who's now joined us today. And it's a pleasure to introduce Dan Hobbs and Dave Rowland. So Dan, I'm going to hand it over to yourself first, and then Dave, if you wouldn't mind, give yourself a bit of an introduction as well. So Dan, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter, and delighted to be here. It's great to see so many participants and attendees at the webinar. But my name is Dan Hobbs. I'm CEO of Protex AI, and I'll be talking with Peter on all things AI related to safety culture.
Hi everyone, my name is Dave Rowland. I won't be playing as influential part as Dan will. I'll be managing the chat. So if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to add away, and I'll look to be able to either get to the answer the questions during the chat, or even in the QA, or even after as well. So hopefully we can get to everything, but anything that's outstanding, we'll make sure that we get an answer back to you.
Brilliant stuff, smashing. Thank you ever so much, you two. So why is AI important to food and drink then, especially within our industry? Well, I mean, between Industry 4.0, the wider digitization agenda that we see across the industry and within health and safety, AI is becoming much more important. It's helping us reduce cost, reduce complexity, reduce risk, but also importantly, reduce harm across so many different areas and different facets of our business, from the way that we do our standard manufacturing activity, all the way through to our logistics, through to literally helping any visitor that might be entering our stores or entering our workplaces, as well as protecting and enhancing the health of all of our contractors. There's so much that we can achieve with AI, machine learning, and this significant digitization agenda that we see before us today. And the future is incredibly exciting for what may well come over the next couple of years as well. So this is a fantastic opportunity over the next probably 55 minutes or so for us to dive into AI specifically in a little bit more detail, having a good chance for me to grill down on exactly what parts of AI we can expect to use today, literally from today, within food and drink, but also what might be coming up in the future as well. So as Dave rightly pointed out, please introduce yourselves in the chat, who you are, where you're from, perhaps what type of industry you're in if you're not from food and drink, but are joining us today as well. And feel free to put any questions that you've got in the Q&A while we're going through. So through the next kind of 50 minutes, so before we get into the Q&A as well, we're going to talk about 4 key different areas. We're going to talk about reporting, and that's reporting in the sense of kind of the metrics, but also reporting in the traditional type of safety work that we do. We're going to talk about building mutual trust and enhancing that between our frontline staff and our boardroom, and where we as professionals in the safety community can really start to leverage the importance and power of AI, making sure that people feel and think that what we do is trustworthy as we start to integrate our AI into our digital agendas. As part of that, we're going to also dive into a bit around active participation. How can we get people on the front line actually getting involved with using AI, being excited about it, being interested in it, and actually making sure that it's not seen as just a bolt-on to what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, but actually becomes more of an integrated part of their work that delivers really strong safety outcomes. And that's going to be supported a bit by an M&S case study that Dan's going to take us into a little bit more detail with a little later on. So, Dan, perhaps to put you on the spot, first of all, then, and to kind of make it a little bit more around the namesake of the title of this webinar, what are your thoughts on building a positive safety culture through AI?
Yeah, great question, Peter. Good one to start off with. I think it's on everyone's mind whenever you think of AI and safety culture. I think if you strip it back a little bit on thinking about AI in general, people think of Terminator or C3PO type thing, which is all well and good. That's kind of general AI, but narrow AI is really what we focus on, where we focus in on specific use cases. When we think of AI and safety culture, I think they really go hand in hand. They shouldn't be something where they're combating aspects to a company. When I think about it, it's very much a case of identifying what's going wrong and enabling companies to be proactive by building up data pools. Because if you think of how safety is done now, it's very manual, can be quite reactive, where we have to pull out the data, or we base a lot of our site walks, which could be 10, 15, 20 minutes during a day, which is a very small data pool to work with. So what AI does in promoting this positive safety culture is it enables companies to get a lot more proactive and ahead of the curve when it thinks about bringing data into safety.
I absolutely, completely agree. And it's kind of funny in some ways. It's not so long ago that everything that we were doing in health and safety was just purely paper-based. To say that we're kind of talking about all of these benefits that can come from AI, it's almost mind-blowing thinking how quickly technology has developed to even allow us to be in this situation and to have this conversation today. So if I'm not mistaken, Dan, you've done a little bit of a survey recently, haven't you, as part of Protex? Do you want to kind of give us a little bit of an introduction to some of that and what it means for EHS managers?
Sure. Yeah. So we did a survey only recently enough, and we don't talk about Protex as a company at all. We just want to know people's opinion on AI. When it comes to all things safety. So we put out a poll or a whole survey. We had over 350 to almost 400 participants on that. So we're really excited to share results. We asked things like, "What do you think about AI?" When you the first thing that comes to mind, or even things like, "Do you think it's going to impact your day-to-day life? Is it going to replace people?" So we've got some great results coming out on that, but we've a few to share during this webinar. So a bit of a sneak peek.
That we do, and I'm going to jump into one of that sneak peek little bits now. And this is something that you'd dare I say, here's one that we prepared earlier. But I mean, the question that you've got here. So, how strongly would you agree or disagree with the following? AI contributes to a company's safety culture. Now, again, I mean, you say that you've got nearly 400 responses overall for this, and it's quite a definitive type of answer. Is there anything that you're able to kind of expand on a little bit as to why so many people agreed with AI being a really important part of safety culture?
Yeah, we spoke about it only recently as a team internally and said, if we ran this 5 years ago, 10 years ago, would have been totally different, because people are I guess accepting AI a lot more in what we do. I think the perceptions around AI are changing, where previously would have said, it's going to take our jobs and whatnot. But people are starting to see it on what it is. It's here to complement our existing work and support us, I guess, if it kind of a supporting function when it comes to improving safety overall. So I think that's why people are in agreement with how they mold together.
No, I completely appreciate that. And I'm sure that there's quite a few people on this call that are listening today that are a team of one, but a team of hundreds at the same time. And that is kind of a team of hundreds, perhaps in a little bit of quotation marks, as it often tends to be. And to have something as powerful as AI as being your second team member actually is something quite exciting. I think back to when I was doing my undergraduate degree back sort of in the early 2010s, and was thinking, blimey days, the technology at the time was just emails. It was just Excel. I mean, even Excel at that time was also seen as being quite fandangle for how a lot of small and medium enterprises were approaching their health and safety. So to now have, this kind of almost otherworldly body that is infinitely almost more intelligent than I could possibly hope to be. God, I can't wait to see how AI gets really applied in the workplace, especially more to health and safety. So if I'm not mistaken, I think we've got a little bit of a poll at this point that we can actually launch out to everyone in the in this as well. So this should have jumped up for you as well. And you've got kind of a couple of minutes just to quickly answer this. And it's very similar. Do you believe AI can positively contribute to an organization's safety culture? At this point, Dan, I don't know if you can see the responses coming up as well. It's fairly unanimous.
Yeah.
Fairly unanimous.
So as you say, there people started creeping just the naysayers on it. But it's interesting, it's cool to see where people's heads are around it. AI as a thing is in so many different industries that around the world, like sport, even the World Cup. It's being used quite widely in that. It's in stocks. It's in even in manufacturing. It's used hugely there with robotics and whatnot. So our big question, whenever we think about it, is why isn't it used in safety? Why can't we leverage on the technology that's there to improve and complement our roles and make our lives a lot easier when we think about managing our workforce?
That is a really good point. And again, if anyone's in the chat and has some examples of where they've seen AI, just not even in safety, but maybe just in their kind of day-to-day life, that would be fantastic to hear. For what it's worth, I recently went to Mexico and I speak no Spanish whatsoever, literally no Spanish. And I've got myself a new Google phone. Other phones are available. But as part of this, they've got this kind of new chip that's supposed to be extremely intelligent from an artificial intelligence point of view at better identifying foreign translations. And I'll be honest with you, I put it to work to the nth degree over 2 weeks in Mexico. It was much more than Dos Cervezas, por favor, over that particular 2-week holiday for me. And it was invaluable. Absolutely invaluable. It was just incredible seeing the application from a communication point of view and actually how much more that facilitated. So again, when we think about things like live translations for different safety instructions that we can give out to people and employees on the fly, there's an incredible application for what we can start to see AI being used for in the workplace as well. I can see in the chat there that someone's just put down about Strava as well, being able to deliver some specific information and information on a run, data that you didn't know you even needed. And that's actually a really good point with AI, being able to collect so much data and be able to collect so much information that it can become a little bit challenging to work out how best to place it, articulate it, and visualize it in the workplace. So I'm going to quickly finish the poll now with 93 people having answered. And I'm not sure if the results can come up for everyone, but it's a 95% confidence value here that people do think that AI can positively contribute to an organization's safety culture. So fantastic engagement for everyone in the call on this. Brilliant stuff. Perfect. So thinking then about that reporting type of thing, we've got so much data that AI can gather. We've got so much information that it can take through. How do you feel about AI's ability to be used in our day-to-day kind of reporting or within health and safety reporting overall, Dan?
Yeah, I think reporting is an interesting one. I think it really does encapsulate the majority of time that people put, especially health and safety workers, on it. When we think of reporting and we think of AI and how it can contrast how people are doing it now, I think it adds a lot of value. When we think of how we report and we gather the data, if we look just a data aspect of that reporting, a lot of that data is taken from a site walk, usually, or what's reported by our staff. Which is a really small subset of data to deal with. Because when we look at reporting, we have to pull that data and do a site walk, which could be 10, 15, 20 minutes during the day, which is great and needs to be done. That will always need to be done. But the problem with that is you're basing all of your safety campaigns, your corrective actions and whatnot on that really small subset of data from your reports, but also your staff reports. And the other aspect of that is to report on the right things, you have to see them. You got to be in the right place at the right time with the right people, which is really, really difficult through nobody's fault. And that's really where the likes of AI can come in and gather that data for you, and so that you can just within a couple of clicks have your whole report generated, or certainly the data that you need to build your reports.
I think that's a really good point about the cross section almost that tends to happen when we do safety walks or when kind of we do audits in workplaces. There's a picture that was doing the rounds on LinkedIn a little while ago and it was a picture of a road, and it said basically before the audit, and it was just a completely pothole bit of road. During the audit, the most perfect tarmac you've ever seen, immaculate in your life. And then after the audit, again, just like massively pothole bit of road, right? So thinking about where AI can certainly make the difference, with it being, dare I say, ever present. And we'll touch upon maybe a little bit about that kind of big brother feeling a little bit later on. But it can just be so much more active and engaged and switched on and just accessible and integrated with what we do at every second of every day, that it can make a significant difference. So in terms of the work that you've done and kind of the people that you've been speaking with so far, I mean, metrics, that there's such a huge bone of contention for many professionals. I'm not going to dive into TIR rates and kind of all of that kind of jazz and how people find them useful or not useful. But what I'm keen and interested in around AI, what metrics are businesses and sort of leaders and safety professionals asking you to be able to gather through AI?
Yeah, I think just touch on your point there on the road aspect of it. And that's just human behavior. When we're being audited or we're being reviewed or being tested, our behavior is going to change, because we're going to, the same way you prepare for a final, in the final you perform really, really well, but in other matches you might, not perform as well as you would. I think from our perspective, it's looking at what are the biggest issues on sites, and what are the biggest or the hardest issues to identify, and that's where the quality comes in, to that data. The one we've seen probably most widely used is near misses, where like a forklift almost hitting someone, or a vehicle collision and whatnot. If you think of those, just going back to the ones I mentioned there, to spot a car crash before it occurs or something like that is really, really hard to do if you don't have the right data. So that's definitely a big one. PPE detection is a big one. Walkway detection, surprisingly. One of our teams we work with, he's one of the heads of logistics for Nike. And he said that, similar to what you said, when he goes on sites, he can still smell the paint from the walkways that were repainted before he visited for the audit. Yeah. Which just happens because people perform when they're being tested. So I think from our perspective, it's kind of near misses, walkway detection, speed of things, or kind of PPE detection, and exclusion zones are massive, where people should or shouldn't be. We had a use case where one of our clients was in their port. They had 3 deaths in the past 2 years, so quite dangerous. The reason they had that was people were going to the bathroom in between container stacks instead of walking to the terminal. One person or 2 people, I think one person was in there at one time. Someone hit one side of the container, crushed him, and he died, unfortunately. But these are all the data points that they don't pick up, because if someone's on site, he's not going to do that. But it's picking up those data points when you're not there and identifying those data trends so that you can make the right decisions moving forward.
I think that's fascinating. I mean, when we kind of consider our risk management approaches within health and safety, the holy grail is trying to find the unknown unknowns. And actually even trying to determine what the unknown unknowns could be in the first place is a massive challenge, a massive challenge. There's a really good comment that Cameron Stevens has made in the chat as well, where he talks about the importance of machine learning on company data sets and data for health and safety outcomes. It's a no-brainer really from that point of view. And certainly between the AI approach of being able to define, capture, and identify those unknown data points, and then the machine learning element to be able to really analyze that data a bit further, it's incredible. Absolutely, the opportunities that present themselves, especially within not only high-risk industries, but lower-risk industries as well. Pretty much your standard, dare I say, warehouse operations being lower risk than sort of perhaps nuclear or maritime. But the opportunities are seemingly endless, almost at this point limited by our imagination as health and safety professionals for what we want to get to and what we want to see. So, I am conscious though that between all of the type of metrics that we can collect with AI, we might start to see kind of near miss numbers and kind of just hazard spots just start to get not necessarily artificially inflated, but naturally sort of just increasing and increasing and increasing. Do you think in the future we'll start to see safety professionals define their metrics by what's captured by AI and what's captured by people? or do you reckon we'll start to see kind of a convergence of these together within a single kind of subset or set of data?
Yeah, absolutely the latter on that. I think it's there's no reason why it should be one or the other if both resources are there. And people seeing things are going to be totally different. So there's some things you can, for example, there's limitations on an AI, and we're very open about talking about those. So for example, someone asked us, could we identify violence? Someone going to punch someone or something like that. But the AI system, the only way that's really going to see it is you can't tell feeling, unfortunately, yet with AI. You can't tell what someone's going to do or things like that. Will that happen in the future? I don't know. Not for us anyway, but certainly could happen. But even something like throwing a punch, if you're going to throw a punch, it could also look like a high five, which is the total opposite of the intention beforehand. One's a high five, what's the other one's are going to hit someone. So those type of things. So that's where the human aspect comes in, where you have the even going to reporting, where they can add a lot more personal information about it that the AI can't. So I think they very much are pooled together.
No, I completely agree. And it's such an important point there about context and intention. I think if we ever get to the day where AI can truly work out the difference between a mistake and a violation, blimey, that'll be an interesting day for health and safety metrics, I'm sure. Really, really will. But until then, definitely that human integration, that human touch point on the data and the type of information that's gathered, I think will really go a long way to helping improve the quality of any metrics that AI can capture. Now, I'm interested in some of the bits that I've got up on the screen here around some of the results that you've got, again, from the survey, if I'm not mistaken. And I can see here that 80% either agree or strongly agree that AI can improve the quality in the EHS information, and 77% either agree or strongly agree that AI can help identify areas of risk in organizations. Perhaps particularly, can you give us any examples of any of those areas of risk in particular that have been identified through AI, maybe beyond what you've discussed already, or if there's any that you'd like to kind of talk through a little bit more?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you say context. I think that's what AI really provides, especially with the way we do it. Now, AI can be used in many different forms for argument's sake. I know we're on this and we're representing Protex, but also representing AI in safety as a whole. For us, that we use computer vision. So we link it with existing CCTV, enable companies to identify behavior trends with video. And with video, you get context. I think the real how can it improve quality? And what it was actually came from a client we work with, a couple of them actually, is removing bias out of it. So when you can remove bias out of anything, although I said, maybe I'm contradicting myself with the violence aspect of it, but from a general day-to-day aspect of it, having video and seeing exactly what happens takes bias out of reporting. When you take bias out of something, you remove the friction around the results. Because if you can, for example, if there was a case where a report was written about Peter wasn't wearing his hard hat properly, Peter's going to think, well, you thought I wasn't, but I thought I was. So that's where you have that conflict on it. But what AI does is it removes that. It just gives an independent perspective on things rather than basing it off human perception.
And that piece there about that human perception and the subjective nature of what might happen versus what happened is a nice segue really into the element of building that mutual trust between our frontline staff and our systems and what we decide that we're going to lead with as EHS managers. So again, I've got a nice little bit of a graph here that you've put up before, and it was how strongly would you agree or disagree with the following: that AI compromises workers' privacy? And as you've got, dare I say, it's a little bit of a hung result really in some respects, but it's a little bit more toward the disagree side. I think it's fair to say more than the agree that there is a compromise of privacy there. But I'm curious. In the professionals that you've kind of spoken with, both in and out of health and safety, how do you think that AI will change trust in the workplace, and what trust might mean between especially frontline staff and supervisors and managers?
Yeah, I think, and even the highest answer on this was neutral, which I think was the most interesting thing. Is there isn't a definitive really result out of this, which is interesting. I think it's because it's such a sensitive topic, trust, that not many people like talking about, but they definitely should. I think when people think of AI, and it goes back to what we now, obviously everyone on this call with 95%, which was quite high, but I think overall people still think of the Big Brother approach of it's going to it's always watching us, the aspect to it, and Big Brother says you did this and Big Brother said you did that. What we've seen and what our clients have done, and they've come up with ideas far beyond of what we've done, like Marks and Spencer, where you have to bridge the gap from this is what we're doing and this is what our workers know that we're doing.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. Where AI, when it comes into the privacy aspect of it, one, trust really comes in when we tell them why we're doing it. Look, safety isn't a production metric or anything like that. It's trying to stop people from getting hurt and going into harm's way, like you mentioned at the very start, making sure that they go home in the same way that they came to work. That's what we're trying to do. When you make that very transparent to the worker, that's where it kind of alleviates fears, because the worst thing in not only in say work and whatnot, but uncertainty is such a awful thing when it comes to anything. You know, is if we don't know what's going on, we get anxious about it and we're going to push away anything that comes around that. Where transparency comes into it is enables you to say, hey, this is exactly what's happening. This is how we're doing it. And I guess from our perspective, I think the onus is on the technology company ourselves to not pick up individual aspects. So privacy comes into twofold. Privacy comes into individual privacy, and privacy comes into company privacy. Individual privacy is things like your facial recognition, finding out things about me. The way we run AI and the way AI is regulated, I guess, in that case by the companies, is not enabling companies to do that. So we don't pick up any facial recognition. We don't pick up any personal information, think of PII, anything like that. And you can blur people, blur bodies, all that type of stuff. Company privacy then is where is data processed. So if you give data to a company or as an employee, you expect them to handle that in such a way that they're careful about it and they're not using it for any unlawful reasons. And that's that trust aspect we're talking about there. So from our perspective, we actually process everything within the network as well. So all the data stays there, but the ownership is still with the individual.
I think it's, again, a really, really good point there about ownership. And I like that difference between defining individual privacy and company privacy. I'm sure for anyone that's listening here from the UK as well, they'll be quite familiar, or within the EU, about GDPR and about data protection impact assessments that they'll need to go through as part of collecting any of this type of data that could otherwise identify a specific individual. But again, to reference some of the points that have been made in the chat that I can see just bouncing through at the moment, I mean, I've written it down here as well, but it seems that having defined processes within the business that very clearly, simply, and concisely articulate communication of what we're doing, the intention behind why we're doing it, and the outcomes as well, I think will go a long way in a really simplified, plain language manner for building that trust with people and building that trust across not only the immediate needs of the business, but also the longer term needs of the business as well. So no, very, very excited to see how trust can develop. Now, at this point as well, Dan, I'm not sure, I've lost in all of my tabs, I've lost the sheet I had with all of our polls on. Do we have another poll at this point to jump out with people?
We have another poll. For
amazing stuff.
One for everybody. There, so you can so here we're asking, do you believe the AI compromises workers' privacy? So
we're going to let this one run for probably about a minute or so at this point. The answers are coming in thick and fast, and you know, I'm sure that from what we've discussed there, dare I say that we've blown open the debate a little bit further as well. Certainly the answers so far would maybe imply that. Yeah, very keen. We've got so far 75 people have responded. I'm hoping we can get up to about kind of 93 or so, 95 before we might kind of close it for a second.
Sure. Interesting though, you know, and it is such a hot topic across everything, across anything. I think, you know, AI in general is used across so many things, like in the medical field, it's now being used for x-rays or identifying cancer. And that's where you have the unbiased aspect to it and trying to bring in data to it, because that's we need to be making decisions. But
perhaps as a quick point, just while we're finishing off the poll as well, how do you see we can use AI to celebrate some of the good things that we do in health and safety? You know, I know so far we've kind of talked about things like people not walking in the correct places, PPE not being worn properly, but how can we use AI to just identify and share the positive things within health and safety?
Yeah, the good goods, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Talk about them, you know, like not just so you can create things which we do where we create safety scores. I'm using safety scores. You can see how you change over time or whatnot, and you should celebrate them. Celebrate the wins when we're, you know, across the board when you're doing that, or good work. If people are, you know, if we reduced near misses on our site by X amount of percent, celebrate it. You know, it's a huge thing, and I think the reason it's hard to celebrate now is people are still saying, well, you know, it's through a report. There was subjectivity in it, so we can't really celebrate it. But if you can do it based off data, then it makes it a lot better.
Do you know, that's a really good point. And again, where bringing back to what we were saying earlier on, a lot of our standard human interventions when we do safety bits, so safety walks, when we do kind of near miss hazard spots type of thing, they don't always focus just on the negatives, but you can't necessarily get away from the fact that a hazard or a near miss is because of the absence of something, or it's because of something that's been identified that isn't as good as it could be. So seeing AI as that opportunity to develop positive safety metrics and to develop actually the success points where, hey, we've actually had 95, 96% compliance, or we've done 96% of this beyond compliance step that we can measure and tangibly prove at every point of the day. I think that that's a fantastic opportunity. So we've hit over 90 people. I'm going to stop sharing and share the results of the poll. And blimey, that is quite split, isn't it? So do you believe that AI compromises workers' privacy? We've got 27% say yes, 36% say no, and 36% say not sure. What do you make of that, Dan?
Very interesting. It's similar to what we had with our other survey, which is really cool. I think a really interesting point is how you use it. So there's some means you could do it where think of speeding, right? You have your speed vans, and you have the policeman and policewoman is in the speed gun and can catch you. That's an element of AI. That would be, you did a bad job. We got your license plate. We're going to tell you you did a bad job and send you a fine. When we look at safety overall, and the way that we certainly push it is managing by the collective. Not using it as a finger wagging exercise where we saw Peter not doing this. That's a terrible job. He didn't do that right. When you manage by the collective, you're identifying trends and trend analysis, and you'd be surprised. It's not usually not just one person doing it. It's a lot of things, or walkway detection, and it's usually not the person at fault a lot of the time because they haven't been trained correctly, or the training wasn't effective and whatnot. We've seen with the likes of M&S, they brought that into their training. They're saying these are the top things we're seeing, guys. Collectively, we got to solve this. Talking to your supervisors on site of each shift and saying these are the steps we're seeing. Let's get involved. Let's get everybody involved in it and try to fix it. So when you manage by the collective and take away that individual privacy aspect we mentioned, that's where we see the most wins happening.
You know, again, I think that's a fantastic approach to safety. We talk, I've said it before, I've always felt that safety is almost, as a profession, at risk of talking too exclusively about an inclusive topic. You know, we exclusively at times can identify the people or the things that go wrong, that don't go the way that we want them to do. But we do that almost at the expense of the inclusive element of everything that goes right around it and everything that is positive from that point of view. Now, at this point, again, that's quite a nice segue into our point around active participation. So I've got another slide up here as well, and it does reference here 45,001, but I'm keen to kind of get something specifically from you at this point, Dan. So, you know, we know that participation, getting people involved, is absolutely the way forward for health and safety, and progressive and inclusive health and safety. But for many people, that education piece on technology and the benefits of things like AI can be quite overwhelming. It can be quite difficult to articulate. So if I were to ask you right now for 2 top tips that everyone on this call could take away to engage, excite, or educate their staff, be it at the frontline or the boardroom, on what AI can do, what would they be? So 2 top tips to excite, educate, and engage staff across the hierarchies on what AI can do. Go for it.
Yeah, really good question. I think my first one will be what I just mentioned there, is managing by the collective. Look at it from a holistic perspective, not an individual side of things. As if we bring in this thing, Mary's not going to misuse the walkways or something like that, or John's going to wear his hard hat. That's not a way you should look by. You should always look at it from a holistic perspective, from a board level. If you're at that level, looking at it like that, like how do we improve the company as a whole, not how do we stop X amount of staff doing this? Because going right back to the start of this webinar is safety culture. Culture comes from within the organization, from the people at the core of that. So I think that's really, really important. I think the other aspect of it is when you're looking at AI and getting participation, taking a step back. Don't just come in and get something and you're like, throw AI at something and hoping it works. That doesn't work. The best way of doing it is sitting back and saying, okay, what do we want to achieve here overall? A really important aspect of when you're bringing in a tool like this is understanding that it's a tool. It's not a solution, right? So what I mean by that is if you think of AI as your solution, that's straight away the wrong way to look at it. It's not going to solve all of your problems, and just because AI is there, it's gonna make less near misses happen and whatnot. That's not what it's about. It's understanding that it's a tool that's going to help you achieve your goal in that regard. So saying, okay, well, what do I want to achieve here as a board member, as a health and safety manager, as a health and safety director, for example, and how can I apply AI to do that? So is it a case where you mentioned the unknown unknowns? Are there these hypotheses we have that we want to learn more about? Then and that's our goal, is to understand that more. Great. Let's build some rules or understand exactly how we can pull that data to make that. Is it a case where we have lots of near misses, but we're not too sure why we have those near misses or the context around it? Great, fantastic. That's your goal. You want to achieve that. How do we apply AI to use that? So understanding that AI is not the solution, it's a tool to achieve a goal, I think is really, really important. And you have to take time to think about that.
Perfect. So manage by the collective, not the individual, and define what you want to achieve through using AI as the tool towards your solution. Yeah. I think that's a fantastic set of takeaways for people to jump away with and to really take away with from this question around active participation. And I think it's a really powerful point around community as well. Dare I say that there are no true experts out there on the AI in health and safety. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's absolutely people that know exactly what we're doing when it comes down to applying AI in the workplace to achieve safety outcomes. But if there's anyone on this call thinking, geez, I wouldn't even know where to start in articulating my solution, if you've seen someone in the chat, reach out to them, find them on LinkedIn, come have a chat with us, drop a message in your community groups from health and safety, and just get talking about these solutions and how people are using AI as a tool. Because I think that, again, when there's so much opportunity, it can almost be really hard to reach out and grab something definitive to apply in your own workplace. And talking about it, reaching out to people, I think is a really strong way of doing that. Oh, terrific. So is there anything else on active participation before we jump into the M&S work case that you want to kind of talk through a little more, Dan?
I don't think so. We've got some great use cases. I think the other thing is, if you are bringing in a solution, remember that software provider or that consultant has seen it lots of different times. They can also help there to leverage how to maximize the use of that tool.
Perfect. No, brilliant stuff. So at this point, Dan, I'm going to hand it over to you in a little bit more detail to talk us through around Marks and Spencer's use case and how they've managed to reduce their incidents by 80%. I mean, a phenomenal number. So I'm really keen, just if you could just have a talk through how they've done this, what they've done, and again, if there's any kind of takeaways, and we'll kind of leave probably about maybe 10 minutes or so for Q&A at the end. So you've got roughly about 10 minutes aside, Dan, unless we finish a little early and could jump into more Q&A.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we so again, at Protex, what we do is using camera software. So existing CCTV to identify behavior trends that lead to accidents in the likes of warehouses, ports, manufacturing firms, and big heavy industries like that. So we worked really closely with M&S's sites in Castle Donington and then further in their Paddington sites to use AI to spot all these type of things. And we got some really great results that we weren't even expecting. And I guess a big reason we got that wasn't through, again, we're the tool. It wasn't through us saying, this is how you should, work with your staff and whatnot. It's very much led by them, which is great. And we would assist them in that journey to achieving their goal. So what they did is they had a few rules that they wanted to identify adherence against, things like walkway detection, things like near misses, similar to ones we spoke about earlier. We feel though that the reason that they were able to achieve such a impactful result out of the back of using Protex AI was looking at it from the collective approach. So what they did is they let Protex run for I think it was a couple of days, and they just brought in data. How many misuse of walkways did they have? All these type of points like this. And then they used this in their training. So James Carter, who is also an IOSH member, I think he's on one of the panels, the Midlands panel, if anyone knows him, is an absolute amazing thinker when it comes to this type of stuff. Where he said, okay, well, how can we involve this with his team? Like Alice, Alice is probably our best user of Protex across the board, who works on James' team, to improve safety. And what they did is they took this data and they brought it back to each team. So they had different shifts that happened over the course of a week, and each of the shifts have a shift manager. They would then bring that back to and said, okay, well, after the first run of Protex, they said we were able to pick up these type of things. How do we improve it? So they work collectively with their workers on trying to achieve it. The great thing about using vision and using video is you get context around things, and that's, I think, a massive part of it. So they showed it. They said, hey, these are the things we're seeing. These are the why people are doing it. They noticed at lunchtime, for example, there was a huge peak of events, which they never would have spotted if they were doing it manually. They said, okay, well, we need to be on site then at 1 p.m. so that we can identify why these things are happening. So they did this over the course of 4 weeks, and within 4 weeks, they were able to reduce safety events by 40%, just by going back and saying, this is what's happening. These are the things that are most relevant in our warehouse. So these are things we have to stop.
Sorry, 40% in 4 weeks.
Yeah, which is a great return, you know. And they just kept repeating that process. They built it into their existing health and safety workflows. I think that's really important. And again, that goes back to the whole thing. Just putting it there isn't going to solve it. It's a case of working with a system, working with a tool, and our team to say, well, what are the other things we should be identifying? And now they're expanding it across their sites or site in Castletownship, and then further afield in one of their London bases now to replicate that return. And they're seeing a great reduction across the board. I think the biggest thing and the best thing about it was people, to be fair, at the start were like, whoa, a camera system, you know, that's going to, you know, impact on the way we work, right? And that's privacy or not preserving in this regard. Alice said that she very quickly saw a change. So, oh, this is changing how we do it. It's making the workplace safer, and there's a lot more. And there was buy-in from the staff, and there has been since. I think a big part of that is really understanding, and like I mentioned, bridging that gap between the system and the workers. And the biggest part of that really is the understanding that, and what M&S really pushed is we're investing in your safety, which was massive when it came to getting buy-in from their staff. It wasn't a case of we're hiding this. It was, no, we're absolutely investing in your safety. We want to make sure that you go back the way that you came to work. And that really helped to develop that mutual trust that we spoke about as well.
Blimey, there's loads to unpack there. Apologies if anyone's just seen me kind of looking down thinking I wasn't paying attention. Dare I say that it is just starting to write a whole bunch of notes on there as well. But some of the things that I've got down, so they'd integrated it into their training. They'd showed back the footage, but talked it through. They identified the perceptions, the feelings from the staff, but also the cognitions. How did they think about the way that they were acting? And use the video to really kind of back up the messages and to showcase good examples and bad examples, but to really change that activity and those behaviors. They've built it into their existing health and safety workflows that had the capacity to absorb the benefits that AI can have as part of it. And there was some very good conversations that you mentioned there around really just articulating and framing the conversation in a certain way. We talked before about the negative versus the positive side, but the classic one, is this a cost or is this an investment? And to hear that M&S had articulated it into the investment side of things, and that kind of frame of the discussion, I can see how that's gone a really long way in a very positive way there. I've seen that there's a comment that's come through as well from Darren Greenwood saying that people need to understand why you're introducing AI and how it's going to impact and specifically here improve things for them, to sell it correctly, involve them, and there shouldn't be a problem with engagement. Darren, I completely agree. I think that certainly this example here in M&S is very evident of that as well. And certainly that big question on the importance of why, but also the importance of what, in a way that's very easy to understand. I'll be honest with you, without maybe the staff seeing the videos and seeing the outcomes themselves as to what's been captured, a part of me wonders if it would have been as effective. Maybe not, maybe so, but the fact is that they did show it and it was incredibly effective in what came through. No, really good stuff, that, Dan. Really, really good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Just comment on that. It's funny if you didn't say AI, maybe we'll take AI out of our name, but AI, just said software, probably people wouldn't mind, And just again, apology. I know Dave put in the chat. My dog is currently underneath the table. I had to bring him to work today, so if you can hear snoring, that's he's all right. He's fine.
I thought we were more interesting than that, Dan. I'll be honest with you. I really did.
We were going to get him involved, get his take on it, but I don't think he's going to make the end of the webinar, unfortunately.
Oh, I love it. Brilliant. So at this point, Dan, I think it quite nicely brings us into a bit of an opportunity for some Q&A for kind of the remainder of this session. I've seen in the chat that there's been some fantastic questions that Dave's managed to gather. I haven't checked the Q&A section specifically myself, but before I do, is there any other polls that we've got that we want to kind of put up at this point?
We got one more. I guess just given what we've spoken about, we're all about, for context, we're constantly learning ourselves as a company, and we want to keep this conversation going with some great people. So I think we have one more poll. If anybody's interested, just before we get into the QA, if anyone is interested in chatting with our team on it and learning more about what we do and AI in general, just conversation. Yeah, would love to know if anybody is, and we can make sure our team is, and no problem if not. It's more so if people wanted to get in touch. I think the conversation that's happening in the chat, it's great to see it pinging all the time. You can usually be on some of these and they're not really moving. But if anybody would like to know what we're doing and how we might be able to work together, we'll be delighted.
Perfect. Well, we'll leave that one running in the background. And Dave, at this point, I'm going to hand over to you. I can see that you say you got some juicy questions ready and waiting. So over to you, Dave. What questions have we got from the chat and from the Q&A?
I'm back, and thanks so much for all the feedback. It's been great. There's some really good engagement throughout the whole webinar. So thanks, everyone. Probably won't be able to get to this in terms of time restrictions. Probably won't be able to get to every single question. So we'll make sure if we don't get to any of them, we'll get to the post webinar. But I'm just going to take just some at random. So maybe just one of the questions: Will AI take the HSE manager away from the shop floor? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I might chime in there. I don't think so at all. I think what it will do instead is make your time more effective and more efficient. So, for example, using AI, you can build up data, but not only data about what's happening, but when it's happening, which is massive, right? So, for example, you might not have anything happen between 9 and 10 a.m., but that might be when you do your site walks. But maybe everything else is happening around that you're not seeing. So when you should be on site is really important, and knowing that can be done through using a system like ours.
I think that's a really strong point there, Dan. And as the saying goes, correlation doesn't always imply causation. So I had a bit in a very low tech kind of way collecting the time that all of my hazards and near misses were happening. And it seemed to be that it was happening between 9 and 10 o'clock and between 1 and 2 o'clock. And I thought, oh my God, this is great. I know exactly when to go down. And it would be literally as people came off their breakfast cup of tea and as they came back from lunch and they thought, hey, cool, I'm going to get it done. And then it's sorted, like I've kind of done it. And I thought, oh, geez, I've gone completely, I've dived into the data, but it's led me down the complete wrong direction. And actually hearing, for example, in the M&S example, where they used the standard data that had been collected through AI to identify that specific time in lunchtime was the most appropriate piece. Yeah, I think that Perhaps from my perspective, from a health and safety point of view, I'd say that there's probably going to be the same, if not more time that EHS managers or HC managers will spend on the shop floor. But as you say, they're down much more directed into when it'll have the most impact and the most value to add.
Cool. And so another question we had about, and again, it seems to be a very positive reaction around kind of the adoption of AI. But I think one question that came in through the chat was, for maybe more small to medium-sized businesses, how do we help them building a business case maybe for a solution like ours? Is there anything that you would maybe discuss?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that tip I mentioned of sitting back and seeing what you want to achieve. Is it a case where for smaller to medium-sized companies, what is it that you're trying to achieve? Is it a case, or what is your problem? You know, is there a problem? You know, it might not be. But for example, is it a case where you're not there all the time? You can't be all the time, but you need to have a data pooling system there to gather that data. That's a great way to do it. If it's a case of you know, we've had we work a lot of night shifts. We can't put people on that. Having a system there can be used in tandem with it. So I think it's very individualistic approach to it. But I think standing back and saying, okay, well, what are my goals here? What do I want to achieve? Will help you stem to see if you actually need it. You might not need it, but if you need something along the lines of AI.
Just to quickly jump in there, Dan, I mean, just hearing you talk there about the productivity side of stuff is actually quite fascinating. A lot of the time, certainly in my experience, when you've been working out CapExes for new safety systems, your standard return on capital expenditure doesn't always apply because your outcomes are kind of much more value on investment focused. They are around that kind of productivity piece, that resilience piece, that the overarching belief that you will get reductions in effectively injuries or incidents and ultimately improve safety outcomes. So again, hearing you kind of talk through that approach, I think that would go a long way for a lot of safety professionals being able to get the buy-in, certainly from a financial point of view, for however much any AI system costs.
Good. Okay, so I think one thing as well is more, or maybe touches off the mutual trust aspect of the webinar content, but how do M&S get around the GDPR aspects to be able to show videos of their workers?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And just for context, I'm one of the co-founders of Protex, and the other co-founder did a PhD in computer vision privacy. So we know everything there is to know about all this type of stuff. But a really good way of doing that is where the data is held. So if same way, the CCTV is there anyway. It's picking up information, and you can use that as from a GDPR side of things. The other aspect of it is facial blurring and whatnot. You can do that too, so you're not picking up the actual individual on it. So the reason where GDPR comes into it is where the data is processed, but it's also what data is being collected and how it's used. So if it's a case where you were saying you're picking up Peter's face here on a screen or Dave's face on the screen, that isn't GDPR compliant, but there's lots of means around that. But on the flip side, in the US, for example, they're not as privacy concerned. Similarly, in the Middle East, they're not as privacy concerned. And there's they can get away a lot with that. But I think in the UK, certainly, and Europe, where we're most active, we always have conversations around how you can use the system to be GDPR compliant.
One question around metrics. We discussed how AI can contribute to a positive safety culture. What type of metric would be most relevant to that as a concept?
I think you have to look at it collectively. I don't think there's one specific metric that was say. I think event, you know, if you're to pick one, I think number of events, because that's where it's going to be your sweet spot to identifying how safe a facility is. So if, for example, you had 31 week, you implemented a corrective action or a training program, reduce that, that's your metric to see how safety's improved over the course of it. We have our own metrics ourselves, but if you're doing it with any system, you would expect that way. But we have safety scores that takes this data and manipulates it to say, okay, well, this is your safety score this week, and whatnot. One question we do get, which maybe some people are thinking is, well, is this too much data? Is this too much data coming in that I have to manage? And again, the onus of that is always on the technology company, regardless what system you bring in order to make that data much more digestible through dashboards or things like that. And I think that's an important, again, when you're thinking about bringing in any system, you need to realize, okay, well, what am I dealing with here?
I think we're coming very close to the end here now as well. So one question that is usually kind of is most fitting at this point is, what do we feel in 5 to 10 years time? What do we see AI looking like and maybe influencing? What does it look like influencing the EHS professional?
Yeah, Peter, love to get your take on this one first, because you're good noggin on this.
I'm gonna try and keep this as concise as I can. There's going to be a lot more integration between AI, machine learning, wearable tech, but accessible outcomes to do with health and safety. I'm talking like real-time metrics like we see with machine condition monitoring, but visualized and articulated to the workforce so that they can actually have more of an idea about what's going on. It's a shame that Cameron jumped off before, but XR solutions, so augmented reality as well, linking into all of this. When you say think about the collective from a people point of view, it's going to blow everything out the water. Think about AI, XR, machine learning, and people together. It's a very exciting future for applying safety, especially within food and drink and within manufacturing environments, I'm sure.
Yeah, I totally echo that. I think where we're at as an industry as a whole is actually pretty premature when it comes to technology. We do reports, and like you said, we still met people who are working on paper. Which is funny. If you compare it to other industries, like any other business function, they all have software systems that they use or AI that they use. So safety is very much only at the cusp of where we can go. So exactly that. We work with wearable companies. We've seen like using VR and training. I think that's really, really, really smart to put people in really difficult situations, but in the meta world, if you want to call it that. So it's really interesting where it could go. I think from our perspective, because it's only the start, what's really going to fuel this going forward is there's great technology companies and there's fantastic safety people. You rarely find one that will have a technology company that is super specialized and also has a bunch of safety people in it. We certainly don't. We're technologists. Leveraging that combination is really what's going to accelerate the growth in this, of using the knowledge that everybody in the chat are putting in. Because I think the great thing about safety is it's not competitive, right? You're very happy to share with another company of how we are improving safety because everybody wants to see people being safe. So I think that the way it's going to accelerate and how we're going to get in 5-10 years time to this amazing software industry is leveraging that knowledge pool that both of these stakeholders have in the journey going forward.
Brilliant. I love it. Absolutely love it. So we've got less than a minute to go. So at this point, if I can certainly just extend my thanks, Dan, Dave, for the time that you've given us today, and to everyone that's joined us from across the world. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you and engaging with you on this today. There is one final webinar feedback poll that's just been launched. If you could just provide some answers to this, it would be massively and hugely beneficial from us. So for all of us here from IOSH, and certainly within the food and drink industries group as well, we are absolutely delighted to have delivered this webinar to you. I hope you found it informative, hope you found it enjoyable and useful, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you at ours in the future as well. So thank you once again, Dan, Dave, and all at IOSH and everyone for joining. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, guys.